Our next speaker today is Zamo Shongwe from the Buhle Farmers Academy. Zamo began her career as a journalist, working in radio, television and magazine. Then she transferred those communication skills to join a team leading South-South relations between universities. Now she works for Buhle Farmers Academy, improving conditions for developing world farmers. Zamo's talk is called No Water, No Food.
Good afternoon. So I'm coming all the way from South Africa to tell you about the work that we're doing at Buhle Farmers Academy. 2016 was the driest year that was ever recorded in South Africa, with all farmers affected. That was swiftly followed by the army worm, just when we thought we had time to recover in agriculture. Listeriosis that killed 170 people. And avian flu, 200,000 chickens culled. It's tough being an African, particularly because as Africans, our food security we are less food secure than other countries. So when all this happens, our farmers, emerging farmers, are then in trouble. We're an organization that selects our farmers from the most rural areas of South Africa. We train them in diverse skills and practical farming in 4 main courses: in poultry production, in vegetable production, grain crop production, and livestock. We put a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurism and instilling business skills within our farmers. And that's most important because when they go out there, being the kind of farmers in the areas that we work in, most of them don't naturally have these type of skills. And we don't have a minimum standard of education. As long as you can able to read and write basic English and do mathematical skills, you are most welcome, which means our age also varies. So those who didn't finish school and those maybe who have been farming but we're not doing it as a business are most welcome. And then we create post-grad funding solutions with them. So how we do this is that by the time that they complete whatever course they've enrolled for, they then have a fully fledged business plan, which they can take around to different funding organizations and banks to seek funding. And we encourage them to have a registered business, because businesses will only do businesses, especially in my country, with registered businesses. And then we encourage them to have separate bank accounts with a dedicated business account, because again, unless they're starting off as a business, they're going to start using those funds for other things, which usually happens with new entrepreneurs. Once they are completed, we then provide them with support. Our experience shows that this support needs to be hand-holding young entrepreneurs, particularly in areas that are rural, for 3 to 5 years, depending on the commodity. For instance, if it's poultry, it can be 3-year cycle and you're okay with about 8 weeks of production. But obviously if it's grains, it takes 9 months or longer, and therefore we hold them for a number of years. And if you remember that first slide I showed, that means we're holding them through the listeriosis or the drought or whatever else may come through. Then we create a pipeline for supply, linking them to networks, looking at what's next in terms of processing and other opportunities that are available in agriculture. And then we continue to upskill them, because new things come up all the time, and we don't want them being left behind, which happens very often. Our farmers, the face of our farmers has changed. Over the past few years, it's been vastly male. But in sub-Saharan Africa, on average, only 15% of landholders are women, and they receive less than 10% of the available credit and 7% of extension services. And so we set out to change this, because we want more women in farming. And if you look at rural areas, the men usually go off into the cities, and it's actually the women who are left in the rural areas who then actually have the opportunity to farm. But we don't want them to just farm subsistently, we want them to farm as a business. And so we've upped the number by creating things like a scholarship and bursaries for our farmers, by making the entry fee almost non-existent. They pay between 2 and 10% of the actual fees, and therefore making it more accessible for rural families. And then we're looking at young farmers as well, with a gap in having young farmers. In my country, we have about 2.5 million farmers. Most of them that produce commercially will be about 160 farmers, and these farmers are white and they are old. In their 50, I think the average age is about 53. That's not enough. Our smallholder farmers are only producing 5% of the food that we need as a country, which again speaks to food security. So we are encouraging young people to enroll in the programs, and our numbers have gone up over the years. We now have 68% of our farmers being young people. Our main barriers are quite simple, and they're not exclusive to us. It's electricity and internet connectivity. We've got 27 operational power plants in my country. 95% of the country's electricity is provided by these, and we also provide 40% of electricity for the rest of Africa. The work that we do as an organization is in the 5% that's missing, those who don't have consistent electricity and therefore have no internet connectivity. So these are the kind of people who live in rural areas where the houses are far apart from each other and there's no data, there's no landlines or anything like that. What we find over a number of years is that there are certain areas that the government has put up, such as schools and clinics, where there is internet availability and electricity. But this is basically the face of our farmers. If you look at the picture, this was 3 years ago. Only 4 of those on the picture are female, and we've now gone up to about 47% of them. In this picture, you might also find that up to about 70% of our graduates or farmers that come in through from the rural areas have absolutely no electricity in their homes, or they have electricity in the homes but not on the farm, which could be a distance from the house. And therefore, we are dealing with people who are not the 95% that can have access to technology. Without the electricity and network connectivity, they have no access to markets, they have no access to news updates, no access to new technologies, and no access to networks as well. And the networks are quite important because we find that the farmers stay on the programs when they feel attached to a certain group and they form part of a club. This is how we looked for armyworms last year. We used a drone. Our farmers don't have that. So when they come on the farm, we could teach them all about how to use a drone, but they don't have access to that back home. So we needed to find the solutions that are applicable back in the areas that they come from. And we turned to this: cell phones. All of our students that come in have got some kind of feature phone, the very basic. They have long battery life, they have access to social media, they have agricultural apps, and they have a radio on them. The social media, we taught our students how to use social media to leverage their businesses. So it wasn't just because now they are walking on average 5-10 Ks to the nearest school to hang out outside because there's Wi-Fi network, but they are playing games or chatting. Now, how do you make a difference in your business using social media? And so we started posting relevant things on our social media pages and getting them to engage with us. We start this while they're still on campus with us so that they get used to this kind of interaction and we build trust. And when they leave, we use this as well. They have agri-apps, which they can download while still on the campus with us. One of the main challenges that we are finding with the agri-apps is that they're not really suitable for low literacy people. They are written for people who live in urban areas, who know measurements, who understand certain things, and we've been challenging the makers of agri-apps to make them more accessible. bigger pictures, simpler explanations, more local words. We've got 11 languages, so we're not going to argue about language because in my country there's 11 official languages. But everything else, if you can make it simpler to understand, we're good to go. And then we teach them also how to Google when they're on there, which you would think is the most simplest thing to do, but how do you know what you're looking for and which sites to trust and how to use that information on your own farm when you're there. In between, we send them links via WhatsApp on the groups that were formed while they're on campus, and they learn how to open the links, and then they learn which sites to trust. This gentleman facing the camera, his name is Ludonga. Ludonga runs a farm in Pitwitif, which is in Mpumalanga. He came to study with us, having gotten land from a logging company, 2 hectares. And on the 2 hectares, he was growing vegetables. He loves growing the vegetables, but he wasn't making a profit. And he was just about to give up when we had a cause in his area. He's 13 kilometers from the nearest town. He does not have a vehicle. A challenge because he can't get his goods to the market. And so when he came, he found a network of people, and using the cell phone, one of the things that he discovered is actually he's really, really good at seedlings. But because he's so remote and basically not within his a zone that people have easy access to, he was not able to get his seedlings sold. And so after coming to the course, with the support that comes after the course, he set up a seedling business that is thriving. By the end of 2017, Ludonga had his seedling business full-time because now he was able to access a market. People were ordering via via WhatsApp and using social media to contact him. And then eventually big business retailers started noticing him and asking him to supply their other growers. From this, he was able to rent another 4-hectare farm, set it up with solar panels for irrigation, and still grow the vegetables, which he likes. But now he's also a trusted member. People trust his product, and therefore they're now coming out to come buy the product. Our results over the past few years, 30% of our graduates farm within the first year of completion, which is really high considering that a lot of the graduates will go back and not farm or farm subsistently again. Our graduates will farm as a business. We've improved our data collection with more of our graduates being able to give us instant data. So when we send out a question via social media, we get instant responses, and that helps us shape our courses and make it more bespoke to our farmers. 50% of our farmers are now seeking land, as support for farming is now guaranteed. We have a huge land debate going on in our country at the moment. Whose land is it? Who has access to it? Who should be giving it to who? Etc. But we found that 50% of our farmers are now actually going out to find land to farm, whether they're renting it or whether they own it. It's not important. Nearly 60% of the non-farming graduates cited both land and funding as reasons for naturally starting a farming activity, which means given the business plan that they come out with and the assistance that we now give them, our assistant is also if they are going to meet a potential funder, we will go with them. So first we will rehearse with them how to present, and then we will actually go to the meeting as support. All the youth indicate their intention for precision farming. Now that they've got a little bit of experience and a little bit of exposure, they all say that they want to go more into farming. And all our alumni remain in the program despite the challenges of weather, funding, or access to land. Thank you.